And now, a fresh new message from Jason USA, CEO of Chibson USA, proud sponsor of Meaningful Times with Friends.
You play guitar and you're still using a small pick? What are you doing? 9 out of 10 guitar players who use a small pick eventually lose the bass. Small pick use is on the decline, and that's why Chibson and Dunlop have joined together to bring you the Mini Jumbo Hand Pick. If you're caught using a small pick, people are going to laugh at you. No one likes getting laughed at. In fact, lawmakers are moving to outlaw small picks by 2026, and by 2036, everybody's going to have one of these. Stop being a coward and get the Chibson Mini Jumbo Hand Pick.
For more information, go to chibson.com or follow on Instagram at Chibson_USA or on TikTok or YouTube at Chibson USA.
Come in. 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 Come in.
All right, welcome. Meaningful Times with Friends. Back, Jason, Ramshackle Dan, Nathan from Newark, and it is episode 11. I think episode 10 was a hit because I haven't heard any complaints. We haven't had any reason to apologize this week, so I think good job, guys.
That's not true. I actually, there was a complaint and I have an apology.
Where was this made?
This is a complaint about the camera issues I was having, and
my parents. Yeah, we got it. Okay, good point. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we received a lot of complaints regarding my last spat of camera issues, specifically some nonsense regarding the graphics. Some people found it distracting. Some found it odd. Many of you were, quite frankly, disgusted. Usually, when I face challenging times, I turn to scripture. This time is no different. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Unfortunately, you, dear audience, have demonstrated that you, in fact, do not have the wisdom to know the difference. And for that, I am deeply sorry.
Amen.
That specific apology goes to my mom and my stepdad, who, if you really want to know where the source of that complaint came from, it's in the comments of episode 10. I love my parents, but you can also, their complaints, part of the show, I guess. You don't have to take them so seriously. They're ramshackle. All right. But yes, good week. So our topics this week, we're getting right into it. It's guns blazing. The first topic is there was a festival, a very well-known festival this past couple weeks that was in the news because unfortunately kind of didn't go their way, but I also kind of felt like I don't think it's as bad as they're making it out to be, and it really wasn't. But the topic ultimately is festivals in general. But the situation was the Burning Man. Burning Man this year was marred by rain, a lot of rain, and it was very muddy. And if you've ever been to Burning Man, there's storms that come in through the Nevada desert periodically. They show up and then they rapidly disappear. So chances are, if you've ever been to Burning Man, you've experienced these storms that come in and they make the ground muddy for a good while. It's like clay, and then as soon as the oppressive sun comes back, it dries up really quick. That's my experience. The 1 year I went in 1995. However, this past Burning Man, it was raining consistently for about 3 or 4 days. So these people, unfortunately, were stuck in the mud and they could not leave their drug-induced festival for another 2 days. So hearts go out to all those affected by the Burning Man who had to leave on Wednesday instead of Monday. But the topic is festivals, I guess, music festivals in general. And I'm going to take a wild guess based on our previous conversations. None of us are fans.
I went to one with Jason last year. What was that called, Jason? Do you remember?
Mosswood Meltdown.
That's it. It was an all punk rock festival. It's the first festival I've been to in like decades, maybe. I mean, I was I was exhausted for like 4 days after going to that thing, just being in the sun and watching like 30 bands or whatever it was. Like seriously, I don't know how people take in festivals.
Yeah, it was a big, it was a long day. The only reason I went, the only reason I bought tickets was because Bikini Kill was headlining, and it was the only way to see them do a reunion show that was available. They unfortunately didn't have any like dates booked at any clubs or theaters or anything. So my friend Mario and I bought tickets like 3 years practically before it happened, but then it kept getting put off because of COVID. And so Mario ended up dying before the show actually happened. So Nathan was kind enough to join me. And I figured
Awesome.
Normally I wouldn't have been so painstaking about it, but I decided that since I paid all this money to see this fucking thing, I was going to see every single band. So we dutifully trudged from one side of the event to the other because they had, opposite stages that the bands would play on. So we went back and forth and watched every single band, whether I was interested in them or not.
You really can't talk about music festivals without using the word trudge, can you?
No, I think it's impossible. True. That's the best word possible.
And I hate the format so much because, there's never been a show or a thing like I went to the first Lollapalooza. I went to, I think, the third Lollapalooza. And there's never going to be a situation where you actually care about every single band. And even if you do, oftentimes in bigger festivals, you're not going to be able to see every single band because they have bands playing at the same time. And it's a horrible way to see a band play because you're just surrounded by a bunch of people who are having picnics and just, sprawling out everywhere, or, the weather sucks, or it's just forever. I can't stand there and deal with that kind of shit for that length of time. It's a horrible experience. I'd much rather see a band play at a club or something like I don't know. It just sucks. Festivals suck.
Yeah. I mean, there's really no reason other than a music festival why I should sit here in front of you and say, oh yeah, I've seen the Prodigy live, but I have.
So have I. And at a music festival, maybe it was the same one you went to. I don't know.
The only one, and I have actively avoided these things forever. I kind of had a feeling. I'm just not a huge fan of like people all doing the same thing at once. Because when you have that situation going, you're always like one incident away from like a full blown riot, and that's just not a situation I like to put myself in. But I'll try anything once, and so I went to Coachella 2002, and when the highlight of your weekend is seeing G Love and Special Sauce, you've taken a wrong turn somewhere. I missed Farside and Tenacious D and ended up seeing Bjork and the Chemical Brothers. And that's exactly what what Jason was referring to, is like you kind of get lost and then you end up seeing the shit that you don't want to see and missing the stuff that you do want to see. All the while, like I actually stopped drinking water in the desert just so I didn't have to deal with the bathroom line. I started thinking about the worst covers ever. And the one that I totally forgot about was Joe Cocker's Little Help from My Friends. And that was a horrible cover. It took like a kind of a throwaway, goofy song and just stretched out into this god-awful, like Jesus Christ Superstar like esque thing. And then I was reading about it because I got obsessed with it minorly. And then they start talking about his iconic performance at Woodstock. Kind of the thing that spawned all this shit that we're talking about is Woodstock. And I'm just like, if this is an iconic performance, that puts Woodstock under suspicion. So I went back and I looked at the Woodstock lineup, and there's the shit that Nathan, Grateful Dead was there. So I'm sure that it's already a strike against it. Did you know that Sha Na Na play Woodstock?
Yeah.
I have read that somewhere. Yeah.
That's fucking disgraceful. For those of you who don't know what Sha Na Na is, it's a cheesy doo-wop cover band in full costume. Like,
Well, and
I'm
I think in the
sorry.
70s they had a variety show. Yeah.
Yeah. So they did cheesy doo-wop covers. And it's just like, you know what? Like, that's just one, that's like the fucking death knell. Like, over the years, the mythology of the hippie culture just keeps falling apart piece by piece. And I think this is the last shoe to drop.
Joe Cocker's song, it's a Beatles cover. Have a little help from my friends. I had no idea it was a cover. I just thought it was the theme to the Wonder Years, the Fred Savage show from the 90s. I didn't care that much about the song to like go down the rabbit hole. And then I'm like, oh, he's doing the Beatles song, but he's dragging it out. And to be fair, he made it his own, even if it is terrible.
I mean, that sounds a lot like an argument I could make for Alien Ant Farm.
Yeah.
I just did.
All right. Just as an aside about Sha Na Na, everybody's favorite band, the Dead Milkmen, wrote a song about the evils of Sha Na Na that contains the line, "Sha Na Na killed that guy at Altamont." And I think that's pretty fucking good.
You got Richie Havens, Country Joe McDonald, John B. Sebastian, Sweetwater. Anyways, incredible string band, Burt Summer, right? Like, this isn't super iconic. Tim Hardin, Ravi Shankar, Melanie Arlo Guthrie, the overrated Joan Baez, Quill, the Keith Hartley Band, Santana, Canned Heat. Like, you start thinking about, like, oh, this iconic political statement. You got a freaking, like, Let's Work Together by Canned Heat. That was their fourth song.
Hendrix playing the Star Spangled Banner, which was in the middle of the morning, from what I understand. So like, it was like when people that were there, they were like, why is he playing the Star Spangled Banner? Nobody gave a shit there. They just recorded it, and then people made it, they just filmed it from a good angle. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh my God, this is groundbreaking.
It kind of puts the misery of Omega Man. If you've seen that movie, it was like the what I think I Am Legend was supposed to be. And this guy, he's like in a post-apocalyptic, he's the last man on Earth, and the only movie he has to watch is just like the footage of Woodstock. If you remember that feature.
It would suck if all it was footage of the Grateful Dead's performance, and that's it.
No, unfortunately for him, you got Grateful Dead, you got Mountain, Creedence, Sly and the Family Stone. I had no idea. The almost as overrated Janis Joplin, The Who, 24 songs. Jefferson Airplane, of course. Joe Cocker played 5 songs. Country Joe and the Fish, 10 years after it, The Band, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Johnny Winter, Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, Blech. Sha Na Na, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, Jimi Hendrix played 16 songs, and that's the lineup. There's like no difference between that music festival, Dave, and literally any other.
I think people just put a lot on it because of the time. There weren't that many of them at the, I don't think there was one like that.
It really did set the mold. That's what made it so iconic.
It was multiple days, and I've only been to one music I don't really call it a festival. Festivals are like, at least 2 days, I feel. But Ozfest was created in response to Lollapalooza not booking Ozzy Osbourne. It's Perry Farrell's invention that had his idea of like, hey, all this music is being bought this year that's ranging from rap to rock to metal to this to that. Let's have a lineup of just diverse music genres. That was his grandiose idea. And it worked for the most part. And it survived long enough to even have Metallica be on Lollapalooza when it got really tired and stupid. But for some reason, they would have Metallica, but they would not have Ozzy Osbourne. Ozzy wanted to do Lollapalooza. Perry Farrell didn't feel, or the committee around it didn't feel he fit their brand at the time, which basically they were just saying, you're not cool enough, Ozzy. And Ozzy was like, or more Sharon, because Ozzy doesn't have a mind of his own. Sharon's the one who runs his mind. And he felt that we'll just start our own festival, which they did and became, very successful with it, Ozfest. And I never went to any of these. I didn't go to festivals. I agree. I don't like going to large groups of things for the most part. So I actually went to a local festival. It was the Weird Grind Fest at Gilman this past May. It was 3 days, and I went to 2 of those days. And why? Because it was barely half full. I knew that there weren't going to be that many people there because not that many fans of these obscure grind bands were going to show up. So I knew there's going to be plenty of room. But the only fest I went to prior to that was 2006. Was the Ozfest, and I went. I think it was because Iron Maiden was opening for Black Sabbath. It was one of the years Black Sabbath was still playing with all of their original members, but Ozzy's voice was blown out. And all I remember I remember only 4 bands from that day. Mastodon, who I actually did want to, they were the only other band I cared to see that day. And they were playing on the side stage. And I didn't want to go be in the large group of people that were all crammed together. I just stood and watched them from the back, and it was very anticlimactic in the day. They're a great band, but I didn't care for it that day. Bought expensive margarita that was like in a large thing that I drank and sipped on. And then I remember seeing Black Label Society, which is Zakk Wylde's terrible band. And then I remember Iron Maiden, which was awesome to watch because they're good. They're a great band, but it was best to watch Bruce Dickinson shit on the Ozfest and shit on the Osbournes in between every song. And they were kicked off the fest like 2 shows later. It was hilarious. And then and then Black Sabbath came out, and the band sounded great. And unfortunately, Ozzy did his best to sing as well as he could with a blown out voice. But the main part I hated about it was I have a chain wallet because I'm a staple of the 90s and I don't want to lose my wallet. And when I was going in through security, they made everybody take the chains off their wallet. They said, you can't have chains on your wallet coming in here. So there was a whole stack of chains, kind of like chain Auschwitz or something. You know, all these dead chains are off to the side being buried in the name of the death camp that is Ozfest for chain wallets. So we're going in there, and at the very first booth that you walk in that had all of these, you know, it was a hot topic inside the Ozfest. What are they selling? Chain fucking wallets. Get in, and then you can buy a chain wallet inside the Ozfest. It was the dumbest shit of my life. And I didn't ever want to go back after, or go, not just that fest, but the only fests I've ever participated in were in DIY. I realized I played in DIY hardcore punk and grindcore fests when I was in Funeral Shock. That was about it, and those were fun. And I've been to Burning Man in '95, and the best way to go to any fest, I feel, and I think this would go for Coachella and the what's the other one that begins with a B out here, the Bottle Rock, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Best way to go to any of these festivals is if you have zero knowledge, and like if you were just like born yesterday and you're just like, what is this, and you just go wandering around, because then you have no expectations. You're not there to see anybody specifically. That's how I went to Burning Man in '95, and I only went because my other friend didn't go with another friend who had the 2 tickets, so he asked me if I would go. I was given a very loose description of what this was. Boy, was there a lot more involved in it than I realized. But I did have a lot of fun, and it was challenging and all that. But when I see that people do this every fucking year, knowing what I went through then, that when I went, they were still allowing guns because they had firing ranges.
Oh, wow.
They still let you go to the nude hot springs because they had hot springs in the area and people would go there nude. Naturally, I was like one of 3 guys that were too shy at the time. I was 19, and me and my very paranoid of homosexual activity friend, his name's Keith. You guys know. We were too scared to show our junk to each other more than anybody else. So we left our boxers on, and there was one other person who left their boxers on, and that was the singer of 3 Day Stubble. That's where I saw it.
Am I wrong? Is Burning Man not a music festival?
It's not. It's a creative festival. There's music. There's lots of music,
but it doesn't have a lineup of bands, right?
Bands that it's not corporate per se, but there are occasionally some known bands. The year I went, Sharkbait was there. They were
okay.
Remember that?
Natural Fit.
And there were some other noise groups that I was not familiar with, and the Mermen were there. I got to see the Mermen, who are a band from the Bay Area that are well-known surf rock instrumental band. But and I got to see them while I was on on psychedelic drugs. When the sun went down, it was the perfect music for that. All the music actually was perfect the year I went for what it was. And it was unusual, like a combination of like live music with like electronic EDM style shit. There was a lot of, there were rave tents, there were that kind of thing. And you remember that survival research laboratories making vehicles and just weird shit. They were always out there. Like they had a presence out there and stuff like minded. They would have weird vehicles. I remember there was a rave RV that basically you would just hear coming from a far away, and you would hear the music as it was coming, and it had like lights going on in it, like there was a rave inside the RV, and it would just drive by slowly. It was just this roaming RV rave, and it was just really funny to see. And there was like a Jeep that had a scorpion's tail on it that had a fire that shot a flamethrower, things like that. And
it sounds like the music is low key or like secondary to the experience. It's not like you're going to Burning Man to see Tupac as a hologram on stage or something.
Not that it's secondary. It's in cooperation with. It's like the music's there as the soundtrack to the experience. And at the time, the experience felt more genuine. But I already knew these were art douches from 1995. So it only got worse the more that tech people and everything else kind of saw it. Basically, the rave tent got bigger. That's really what I see. The rave tent that went the year I went, that just became the whole Burning Man festival. So, and I didn't think it was, people were all shitting on it because, when people got stuck out there, I'm like, fucking, I have all the more reason to hate on all these people. I'm just like, I don't wish people getting stuck in the desert. I don't mind if they die either, but I mean, I'm just saying it's not, something that I'm rooting for.
In Sacramento with my wife, she was doing some continuing education for her job. And they're like, when we checked in, they're like, you here for Aftershock? I'm like, what's Aftershock?
Yeah.
You know what it is? So Aftershock, I just looked up the lineup from the 2022 Aftershock. Guns N' Roses, Tool, Korn, Godsmack, Pantera. A lot of these from I saw through email. Queens of the Stone Age, Limp Bizkit, Rancid, 311, The Cult.
Yeah.
And what's funny is what my wife was doing there was she was going to UC Davis to dissect cadaver brains, which was way more metal than any of these bands on the Aftershock lineup.
But you being a middle-aged guy, it makes sense why he'd ask you if you were there for those bands.
The only fest that Aftershock is one of those fests where I'm like, I wouldn't mind seeing like a couple of those bands, but they're also playing with the bands I hate the most. Basically, that festival epitomizes Deftone fans. And I'm not trying to throw. Well, I am throwing shade on this shit, man. These were just bands that the bands get lumped into. Pantera is one of them. Pantera was the biggest one of them because they were a glam rock band because they were trying everything to throw at the wall at sticks. Alice in Chains did the same thing, but they transitioned into being they were trying to be like a thrash adjacent band. They had that album Cowboys from Hell that has some thrash stuff, but they were kind of like thrown into almost the power metal category. And then they came out with an album that was called Vulgar Display of Power, which I would say is the blueprint for all of the stupid that goes into nu metal and adjacent style bands after, which I would say basically is just you took jock mentality and you inject that into metal, and then you get nu metal. That's what nu metal, you can combine some of that element from like hip hop too, but it was just dumb male thrown into it. Naturally, girls love it because they love nothing more than dumb guy shit. But it always threw a stain on what I enjoyed about thrash metal, because as much as that has dumb male written all over it, they're at their core are guitar nerds, because they're good at technical playing on the instrument and drumming. But you get into nu metal or any of that kind of stuff, and it's like, if you're gonna dumb shit down, I'll go with Nirvana because that's punk rock more influenced, rather than this thing where it's like, we're going to care more about making clean recordings, make sure we get these rhythms really tight in these 4/4 hip hop beats, so that all of the dumbest of men can have the most aggressive of stupid mosh pits in our show and really get that aggression. It's just fucking stupid. I don't know.
I feel like every festival has a lineup of bands that you're gonna like and bands that you're gonna hate. I think that's generally part of the program.
When I looked at Psychofest, that's in Vegas, and the majority of that lineup, even the bands I hate, are bands that I could tolerate in an opening lineup at a club. Not that I hate them, but like they're just not that. They're part of the genres that I know are, you know, wearing my shirts and all that kind of shit. But there's a lot of bands, because there's just a lot of bands out there, and a lot of the bands I haven't even heard of. But you know, if I were to go to Psychofest, the only thing I wouldn't like about that is I'm stuck in fucking Las Vegas for a weekend. I don't like Las Vegas that much. Any other thoughts on music festivals? We good? We good. All right. That silence says we're good. So yeah, we don't like them. All right. We here at Meaningful Times with Friends, fuck your fests. Just, yeah, man, small lineups, end your shows by 11. We need to get home and get some rest.
Speaking of festivals, I just want to wish you all a happy Newark Days.
Oh, that's right. It's Newark Days. And that's
Newark Days this weekend. That's a good one.
Happy Newark Days in South Carolina, motherfucker. All right. Your next topic, everybody, and this one's going to be a doozy, I know. This was suggested by Jason, so why don't we have Jason introduce this one?
I don't remember exactly what made it occur to me, but I was just thinking about the question, where does one draw the line when one is a fan or an enthusiast of some sort, or if you're, whatever, a fan of a band or an artist or a writer? Where does one draw the line when that person commits some act of transgression? So my example initially was Roman Polanski. You know, he famously slept with a teenage girl, and then he managed to evade any kind of consequences for decades. And so some people will say, well, I can't watch any Roman Polanski films because he has sex with a teenage girl, and that's totally inappropriate and wrong, and I'm therefore disgusted by his behavior and think he's a terrible person and will never watch a film that he's made or anything that he's ever been in. And I, on the other hand, I don't know, I like Roman Polanski movies, and I don't think necessarily that the one thing it really affects my opinion about the other thing. If I think that somebody is a completely deplorable human being, yeah, I would probably avoid any of their work. But on the other hand, there are plenty of artists and writers and directors and musicians that have done pretty lousy shit that does not affect my enjoyment of their output whatsoever. And I was just wondering where you all draw the line, or if you think there should be a line drawn in that regard.
Is your forgiveness of Roman Polanski centered around the fact that you too have had sex with a teenage girl?
I have had sex with a teenage girl, but I was a teenager at the time.
Look, let's not mince words, Jason.
You were grooming her. Ramshackle Dan's response right there was saying your forgiveness of Roman Polanski. I didn't imply forgiveness. It's one of those things where, okay, if you enjoy somebody's art and yes, you hear of, you know, behavior more than, I mean, there's crimes, behavior, whatever. Yeah. How much does that affect your opinion of it? And there's people before this before cancel culture became a term, before all of this stuff. One of the people that I remember hearing about, I never listened to any of his music. There was a guy named Boyd Rice. He's a noise guy who, from what I understand, has some what would be labeled today as white nationalist or some white supremacy vibes. Or maybe even flat out statements. I haven't done the research on him. What I do remember was being at a friend's house who had some Boyd Rice stuff and who felt conflicted by having it because of all that. And this was in the 90s. And I just remember thinking, like, I don't know who this motherfucker is. I don't particularly care. But we've had a long history of artists with, you know, deplorable behavior. Who's the one motherfucker who likes to fight, who wrote novels? F. Scott Fitzgerald, is that the guy? Hemingway's the guy who likes fisticuffs. Charles Bukowski, he was a notorious drunk. He was very abusive of people. People still love his fucking bullshit today. I mean, he's a fucking poet. Who cares about poetry? People have always skirted the line and been like, well, it's good art. You can't. People seem to be more forgiving of artists' behavior. And then in the age of social media, that's when everybody acts like what this guy, Bill Cosby, said about grandparents. Remember, he had a bit in Bill Cosby himself where he said, when he was young, his parents were terrible to him. And then when he has grandchildren, the grandparents just want to spoil the kids rotten. He goes, those are not the people I grew up with. You're looking at people who are trying to get into heaven now. And that's what the culture feels like in the age of social media, where everybody wants to feel like they're a good person on some very surface levels, when it's just like, how you don't really know about whatever all this shit's going on. We just started getting into this core black and white. It's one of the things Ramshackle Dan's talked about a lot, is a lot of this performative behavior that is performative. I'm no better. I try to be better, but at the same time, I know that I'm also human, and humans are capable of just bullshit.
No, it's about power. Go ahead, Nathan.
Oh, I often wonder what it would have been like if the Michael Jackson trial for molesting little boys had happened 20 years later. Like, had he still been alive, and social media still been a huge thing. Because I remember at the time, when Michael Jackson was going through all that, there was a lot of talk, especially in my line of work in the radio world, about whether or not radio stations were going to play Michael Jackson's music anymore. Is it inappropriate to play a child molester's music on the radio? And I feel like over time, that all just fucking faded away and kind of got forgotten about, especially since he died. But I mean, for most people, if I'm in my car, I'm listening to the radio and I fucking hear PYT, I'm turning that shit up. I love all the shit that's on Thriller. So I don't, on the one hand, I'm aware that Michael Jackson probably did some pretty horrible shit, but it hasn't affected my ability to enjoy music from my childhood that he made.
That's I think there was a comedian, Andrew Schultz, who had a bit about it. It was one of the only bits I really liked in one of his specials, but it had to do with your art. I think if your art needs to be good enough to outweigh your crimes. So you want to have music that's so undeniable that you can even be a highly alleged child molester, and it's like, this music's just too good.
Exactly. And I don't think Kanye gets that same leeway. Like, again, we're talking about now. I know a lot of people. I personally have never liked his music. The only song I know of his is Gold Digger. I couldn't name a single other fucking Kanye song. But I know a lot of people that are now like, fuck Kanye, and that very much has to do with social media shit, but also because he's an anti-Semite and a dickhead.
Mm-hmm. I think it also depends sometimes if the art, if the behavior puts the artist's work in a different light. So it's like, say you've been enjoying something. One of the guys I kind of thought about this, it just came to me because I was suggested this documentary on YouTube, was John Kay. I don't even know how to pronounce his last name, but Crickfalusi or whatever the hell it is. The creator.
Oh, for Ren and Stimpy?
Stimpy, yeah. And I didn't know specifically what his big deal was, but I just remember hearing that, like, oh, John Kay, he's, whatever, something bad, whatever. I was like, I never liked Ren and Stimpy anyway. Like, I remember Ren and Stimpy was this cartoon that everybody really hyped about in the 90s, I think it was. And it was avant-garde. If you're into animation, like, people are way into anime today. And, like, I know Jason likes some. And I've never been that much of a animation for animation's sake type of guy. Even when I was wanted to be a cartoonist, I just wanted to draw cartoons like Mad Magazine, and I knew some of those artists, but I wasn't some diehard animation, fan. But I got it. I'm like, I look at the art from their cartoon, and yeah, it's very different. They did a lot of extreme things. Both they had extreme character emotions, extreme close-ups that were like grotesque, things like that. However, underneath all that Ren and Stimpy, even there's heart to it because there's emotional heart to it. But there's an ugliness to that cartoon that was part of what its charm was this extreme ugliness with kind of these peppered with this heart in it. But the ugliness was largely, from as I watched this documentary, was largely in part to John Kay's vision of what he wanted all of these artists to just have freedom to do what they wanted. But he was a big part of a lot of the suggestive aspects to the cartoon, because I guess they brought it back briefly, the adult party cartoon, and that was primarily John Kay without the other artists working with them. People did not like John Kay's work without any kind of checks and balances. And he's a character, but he really got in trouble primarily because this dude was dabbling with having an inappropriate relationship with an underage girl who was a fan. Wrote to him. He gets into these intimate friendships with this 14-year-old who was writing to him, and then ended up becoming kind of like an intern, in a stay-at-home intern for him when she was like 15, 16, and her parents were cool with it. But I'm like, you're a man in your 30s, and 30, like, you shouldn't be having somebody else's teenager stay at your house unless there's like a real trust with the family, that especially if it's an opposite gender. And he's just a man child, because he's consistently then hired young women, tried to, I guess, date him. I don't know what I really didn't get that into it. These things don't interest me that much. When it's art, I don't give a fuck about. But that's what he's basically been labeled a creep, a big creep. And I'm like, yeah, he's a creep. Watch his cartoon. It's creepy. It's been creepy. Ren and Stimpy was always creepy to me. So I'm like, same thing with Louis C.K. When Louis C.K. they brought up, he's got these women to watch him jack off, and they were under pressure to do so. I'm like, they wanted something from him, and I'm not saying what he did was right. I'm not saying that they weren't put under. They wanted something career wise from him. He was like, can you watch me jack off? And then occasionally also sprung it on him. However, I don't think it's right, but at the same time, I never liked his stand-up comedy to begin with. I liked some of the stuff he did, but it wasn't like so precious to me that I'm like, oh, he's gone. Yeah, sad loss. I don't care.
Well, based on your comments about festivals, and I'll quote you: "Women love dumb man shit." I don't think there's any dumber man shit than jerking off in front of people. So you might have something going there.
I'm like watching it. Yeah, it's true.
So here's a question. There's like a through line for most of these that we're talking about, like Roman Polanski, Michael Jackson, Louis C.K. All these dudes did all this creepy shit. How did Jerry Seinfeld avoid the heat for the bullshit that he did?
I'll still bring it up. And you want to know why? His shit's good.
Okay.
What did he do?
I love Seinfeld, man.
He was dating an underage woman, like, I think, in the 90s, like when his show was, I think, at its peak.
He was 40. Yeah.
How old was she?
17. It was Shoshana. That was her name. He's always dated a woman that he has a type, and they're even in the show. Like, you can see the type. I want to say there's one episode that with an actress who looks pretty much is the blueprint of all of his girlfriends. It's the episode where George and Jerry pretend that they were gay just to fuck with some people that were eavesdropping, and the girl who thinks she's a reporter who thinks that they're gay is the blueprint. She has black hair. It's like around shoulder length, maybe a little longer. They're kind of like Janine Garofalo in the 90s types.
So it kind of goes back to like the overall math problem. And sorry, I don't have a chart for this one because I didn't really think of it. Nathan thought of it, but there's that ratio of, it's almost like the band name, right? It's like, is that ratio of like the severity of the act or the despicableness of the act versus the quality of your art. And that's why I think R. Kelly, right? Like, he hit the sweet spot. His music wasn't that great, and his what he did was probably one of the worst things you could imagine. So that's probably like the extreme end. And then the Louis C.K. thing, like a lot of this stuff is like, I couldn't think of a single person that got canceled that I was like a fan of that person's work, that they did something really bad. Like if you go to like, what's some horrible shit that happened, like O.J. Simpson. Okay, but like we were too old to watch him play football. He was a terrible actor. And like, I think his best acting to that point was that Hertz commercial where he was like jumping over, trying to catch an airplane.
Naked Gun won. I'm sorry. He was great.
He was terrible. But the movie's great. He was terrible. In fact, his most impressive work came 22 years later when he had the fucking Stones to come out with "If I Did It: Confessions of a Killer." 3.29 stars on Goodreads, by the way. You may want to check that out. But like that,
if he does the audiobook, I'll check it out.
It's probably do a terrible job. And then there's Jared from Subway, right? There's another like horrible thing. Like I'm probably a bigger fan of his art. I mean, I'm a sucker for unconventional weight loss schemes. And the other thing about Jared though is like, does anyone look more like a pedophile than that dude? Like when you heard that news, did anyone react in any other way other than like, oh yeah, I could totally see that. And so like the rest of the people, I don't know, like who cares? I think the closest thing when I finally, because I was struggling with this, the one I could think of was Jose Canseco, because he was like my favorite baseball player, right? And then it's not because of the steroids, because everyone started doing steroids.
Modeled your hair. I remember you had an A's hat, and I always wondered why you had a mullet. And then I realized, oh, it's because of Jose Canseco.
It was because of Dennis Eckersley.
Strong mullet, by the way. Yeah,
strong mullet, one of the best mullet mustache combos. If you really want to look at the archives, it was a failed Eckersley attempt. Mullet mustache combo. Canseco was clean shaven, but what I was really mad at was like he ratted out the entire baseball population. Like he did a tell-all book and just went total fucking rat fink on everyone, and he got blackballed from baseball. And the only thing that he did to redeem himself is he went on 60 Minutes, and they were asking like, oh, he's trying to explain like how he injected Mark McGuire in the bathroom stall, and he couldn't get the word buttocks out without giggling like a third grader. And so that's probably the only thing I respect about like post baseball Canseco. And he just will not go away. If you Google him, he's active in some sort of like 7th rate baseball league or home run contest. To this day, he still claims you go play in the major leagues, even though he's like 60. And he brags about doing steroids, and he looks fantastic.
So, didn't he have a ball bounce off his head and go into the stands for a home run? Yes, yeah. He's always had kind of a clownish air about him.
Yeah, it's great. He was on The Surreal Life. I think he hooked up with Janice Dickinson.
Yeah, who didn't?
Ozzie Canseco, his twin brother, did not.
The vast majority of these people are men. Russell Brand just caught charges recently this past week, not to be relevant. But yeah, Russell Brand, known primarily from the Apatow movies in the 2000s.
What was the accusation?
He's got 4 charges. There's rape, there's sexual assault, there's and then abuse, all the usual.
I wonder why it's interesting, right? Because his latest reinvention of himself is like railing against corporations and the government.
Funny thing is, like I said, the vast majority of these are men. However, when it comes to women catching things like this, it's like J.K. Rowling, who, I mean, clearly isn't canceled, but is someone who has definitely hurt a level of her fan base just by her perspectives on trans people. I don't know if any of you know that much about it.
Oh yeah. And I'm curious to get Jason's thing, because like the whole term TERF is very interesting, right? Is it a trans exclusionary radical feminist?
Yeah.
So what's your thought on that,
Jason?
I think J.K. Rowling is a piece of shit. I think TERFs are pieces of shit. I think anybody who questions the womanhood of a trans woman is a fucking piece of shit. That's pretty much what I think.
I think Harry Potter's a piece of shit.
Were any of you into those movies or books? I've seen one movie.
Oh, man, we were like in our 20s.
I know so many adults who liked that shit. Like
fucking losers, man.
I actually read most of the books.
Yeah, I know a lot.
I read most of them. I didn't. I mean, I wasn't like a fanatic or anything, but yeah, I read them.
Are they good?
Mostly because like I bought them for my mom because she really enjoyed them. I don't know. I'm not really that into fantasy, so I didn't really get that into it. I mean, I've seen most of the movies too. I think just because they were on, or did I go see? I might have seen one of them in the theater. I don't remember.
I had to test when I was testing DVDs. I had to test the Harry Potter movie, and it was the only thing I liked about it was that it was directed by Christopher Columbus, who made Mrs. Doubtfire and some other movie. He had a run of movies that were interesting and stuff, but that was like his. I want to say that was like his introduction to like kind of like a Marvel Studio style movie where he's like making a big IP.
Yeah, And years later, J.K. Rowling makes sure we know that Mrs. Doubtfire is not a real woman.
Yeah, no shit. Yeah, so
Great movie, actually.
Yeah,
it's probably Pierce Brosnan's best role.
I mean, can you think of other famous women that have had to be canceled for any behavior?
I mean, Kathy Griffin, sort of, but again, it was a stupid prank, and I just never thought she was funny. I know you like her, Dave, but she's got an annoying voice, and I don't think she's funny.
No, I've always thought she's funny. Her only indiscretion was she took a photo that she was just doing in a photo shoot. She didn't put that out there. The photographer did, if you believe her story, which I do. And the cancellation, more or less, oddly enough, was in defense of a president that now people, want to, think it's cool now to like not like him. So in her case, I don't think it's not the same as all these things. That was more the culture turning her into a pariah. I don't even think it was in bad taste. Guar did the same thing, only Guar gets a pass. They don't have the zeitgeist paying attention. I don't even think Kathy Griffin has the zeitgeist on it, paying attention. I think people kind of wanted to have this whole thing, if they have this pent up need to want to always burn somebody at the stake. And she became the easiest of targets because she's a woman. And people want to use this whole thing. Oh, I never thought she was that funny anyway. And people love to shit on anything that they don't agree with, that they see as being super popular, which she isn't, but they think she is. And she makes it easier for him because a lot of her comedy was shit talking when she's just doing it in the spirit of Don Rickles, mixing it with gossip. It's easy to hate on her. And then she takes this bold picture of a severed head of Donald Trump covered in blood that was at the suggestion of the photographer. That wasn't necessarily her idea. However, she should have been smart enough to know that I shouldn't be taking this photo to begin with.
I don't like Kathy Griffith's work. I don't care about the stupid picture.
Kathy, unfortunately, is a comedian, and like all comedians, she's spineless too. And she will do what she has to do to serve her working world, but I don't think that makes her a bad person. I think that she made a poor choice as an entertainer who's a comedian who doesn't have that strong of convictions. Her convictions are only as strong as I need to work. That's all comedians are. They're spineless. I just watched a comedian open for a headliner that I know she doesn't agree with probably half of his views in his comedy, the way that he really views things. But she still did it anyway because we're all fucking shills in comedy. And Kathy is a shameless one. But the true fact was she got to learn that all of the people she thought were her friends weren't her real friends. And the first person to call her was Cat Williams, because that dude knows what it's like to be shit on by a media system that just wants fodder. They don't give a fuck about any of these people. So I think Kathy Griffin's situation was, again, just a poor choice in taste during a photo shoot where she shouldn't have even trusted the photographer, and she took this bold photo that she wouldn't stand by if it ever got out. It wasn't her brand. All right. So our thoughts really, I want to say, is it kind of collective agreement that, you kind of depends on how good the shit is?
I think so.
My opinion is literally, I don't care. They're completely separate things. There's whatever the person does that makes them a piece of shit or not, and then there's the work.
You watch Cosby still?
I mean, it's dated. I would still watch it if it were still interesting, but I don't know. It's just kind of boring at this point.
You don't get into that? You don't get into...
I mean, I get into that. If you keep doing that, I might go Louis C.K. on this podcast.
Got Louis C.K. on here too, man.
Hey, the only person that should be mad at Will Smith is Chris Rock. The rest of us shouldn't give a fuck at all.
Yeah, that's true. I get mad at Will Smith because he also he did a show with comedians. He did some streaming thing for Roku or something, literally about a month or two before he slapped Chris Rock. So there's all these comedians. And again, these shills, one of them was, I think, comedian Punky Johnson. I think she was on the thing. And she's somebody nobody gives a fuck about. She's a comedian in LA that also now works on Saturday Night Live. And I don't particularly have any opinion on her comedy or whatever. She might be great. But I only found out about her because she was one of the few comedians at the time right away that was immediately defending Will Smith. People forget he's from Philly. Underneath it, man, he's a hard guy from Philly. I'm like, this was a dude who rapped in the Fresh Prince, in DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. He is he is the elevator music of rap. All right. He's never been any kind of intense personality. He's just a tall, big guy. Yeah, granted. All right. That's about it. And that's if you see him in person. But his entertainment's been family friendly, innocuous, all that kind of shit. His behavior was, again, just horse shit. Not to mention the fact that he just shepherded a bunch of comedians in something prior to that. And then he goes and slaps one of the most respected comics, really because he was only covering his own ass because his wife caught him laughing at a joke. He was laughing at that line and then got caught and then overcorrected because he had some drinks in him, maybe some meds. I don't fucking know. But to say that what he did was some kind of, no, he had to stand. That's some fucking horse shit. And not only that, Chris Rock is a small guy compared to Will Smith. And I love saying this in my act. I'm like, saying that Will Smith is gangster, slapping a comedian who's smaller than him, it's about as gangster as rapping that your parents just don't understand. And I say that with pure conviction because I've never liked Will Smith that much. And his movies suck, man. He's like, people think he's a good actor. He's not. He's never been a good actor. Name one movie, even Ali, when I watch it, I'm seeing Will Smith do a bad Ali impression. The movie, Michael Mann makes a good movie, but Will Smith, trash actor, man.
There was a movie where he was kind of a con artist. It was a long time ago. It was maybe his first, in the very beginning. And he was conning this family. I can't remember what it was. Jason, you and I watched this together.
6 Degrees of Separation. Sorry.
Yes.
Okay.
He was great in that.
Bottle of beer.
He was great in that movie, dude.
How often do you watch 6 Degrees of Separation? Ramshackle. Yeah.
I would say by percentage, I watch one movie a year. So I guess relatively speaking, quite frequently.
You ain't watching movies.
I just said that, so we're in agreement.
No, we're not in agreement. I don't think so. That was good. Thanks for letting me shit on Will Smith, guys.
No problem.
Our next topic. This one is our song. This was suggested by Ramshackle Dan. Dan, go ahead, have the floor, and take us on our journey here.
Yeah, continuing with the theme of this show being too hot to handle and too cold to hold. Nathan's like, hey, we haven't had Ramshackle pick a song, and literally this song popped in my head. I have no idea why. This song is Bobby Brown's "On Our Own." It is the theme song to Ghostbusters 2. This had all the elements of a disaster. It was a cheesy theme song to a sequel to an iconic film that had a cheesy, iconic theme song. If I'm the original R&B king, I'm a hard no. But to his credit, this is way better than the original song. For one thing, he ripped off his own song every little step instead of somebody else's song. For those of you who don't know, Ray Parker Jr.'s Ghostbusters was a ripoff of Huey Lewis's shitty song, I Want a New Drug. And there was a lawsuit and they settled. If you listen to it, it's not close. It's not subtle. It's a complete ripoff. As you say, Dave, this is another in a long line of black artists stealing white music.
Can't separate the art from the artist.
I just want to be clear real quick. Are you referring to Ghostbusters 2 as iconic, or do you mean Ghostbusters the original? Ghostbusters the original is iconic. So I'm saying He was set up for failure. So the difficulty level on this was extreme. You had a iconic movie. The sequel was, I think all of us were expected to be terrible. And then the first movie had a theme song that is still on every single Halloween mix, along with the Monster Mash. So that, regardless of how much that song was a ripoff. So anyways, it's fine. It's actually a pretty good song. It's really catchy. The video itself is very, very, very 90s. We just watched it together. Lots of hard cuts and celebrity cameos, which none of I could name. I saw one woman. I was like, "Is that the sergeant from Private Benjamin?" That was the only thing that lit up. I look away for the screen for a second. I look up and there's fucking Donald Trump. I'm like, shit, did I accidentally click on MSNBC.com? What the hell? The only issue I have with this song is the last line of the rap, and it's bothered me for 30 plus years, which is "Try to battle my boys, that's not legal," which is a very weird thought. It's he wrote, and I've done this before, where I write 99% of the song and I'm just out of gas and I can't think of the right last lyric, and I'll write the last line and I'm just like, that wasn't good. But
that's not legal. It's odd because you could argue that the entire Ghostbusters business model is of questionable legality. In fact, if you remember the first movie, like a major plot point was this like petty bureaucrat, some like wannabe Timothy Busfield lookalike, maybe it was Timothy Busfield, was some city bureaucrat trying to shut them down over permitting violations. So like while they're battling like the evil of the other world, the city government's trying to get them on like technicalities. So even that's just the one quibble I have with the song. But otherwise, given the difficulty of it, the odds were stacked against him, and he came through with a really catchy song. So kudos to Bobby Brown for that.
I think this song would have been more popular if it wasn't associated with Ghostbusters 2. Like it felt like a song that they shoehorned lyrics in the rap part. You know, we called the Ghostbusters in control, like in a song that probably would have been a better hit if it had nothing to do with Ghostbusters. Because if you watch the video is like the cheapest of cheap. Just shots. Yeah, people coming out of a hotel. They're recreating the scene. They even used some of the stock footage that was used in Ghostbusters 1 during the Stay Puft Marshmallow scene. Not during the scene, but when in the initial movie, everything was going on in the high rise and everybody was like looking up. They were gathered and they're looking. Remember, they all rolled up and they're like, yeah, go get them. Go get the ghosts, Ghostbusters. And they still use footage of people that are looking up in the video. You can see near the end. And it's like they're at night. And this was, you know, I don't know. They give the impressions in the day. They got just Bobby and dancers dancing greens, or, you know, basically on screens that are in Times Square or wherever the fuck in New York, because that shit was all over then. And then people are pretending to be impressed by it.
There's a random shot of Christopher Reeve on a bike. And I wonder if he was just riding through Central Park and they were like, hey, do you want to be in the video? Because it's like,
I can still walk. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just random. There's no point of him being in it.
Fuck. Yeah, it's a random video. That's what I think. They got footage of, you know, just random shit. It really was shabbily put together, which was funny because I bet Ray Parker Jr.'s video was just as shabby. I didn't go back and rewatch the iconic Ray Parker Jr.
I think there literally was footage of the Invisible Man sleeping in his bed.
Probably. It's just, these were things that were like shoddily put together because they thought they had an ace in the hole because Ghostbusters was such a big deal. But this sequel came out years later. It was one of the last. It was the second to last movie I ever stood in line to go see. I remember I went with Chris Nornberg. And if he's watching this, he might remember this. We went there early to one of the Cinedomes. I think Cinedome East or something, or no, Cinedome West. It was in Newark. So we stood in line and waited for that fucking piece of shit and went in there and it was not only, it wasn't so much that it was just bad. It wasn't that bad a movie. It was just Ghostbusters was funny. Ghostbusters had a good kind of, you know, a goofy sci-fi horror element to it. And this was just, I want to say it was a bad retread. And then they, you know, I don't know, something about it just didn't, it was hinky. So, and Bill Murray wasn't able to kind of save it with his shenanigans. It just didn't work as a sequel. It sucks when sometimes, you know, and then they've been trying to keep making Ghostbusters since. They made the woman one that everybody loved to shit on. Why? Because people love shitting on women versions of things. And then they did another one that continues this universe, the GCU, the Ghostbusters cinematic universe, with Ghostbusters Afterlife recently, where they actually put a CG version of the dead Harold Ramis in the movie. Shocker, or this is a spoiler alert, everybody, if you haven't seen Afterlife, but they bring Egon back as a ghost. So,
and he smiles and nods.
So stupid.
I think the irony of the vitriol towards this movie, right? Because if you remember the plot, it was like there was this slime under New York City, this demonic slime that fed off of negativity. And the whole like subplot joke was that because it's under like the most negative place on earth, which is New York City, and it's just gaining strength. And I think, I can't remember how they defeated it, but I think it was through positivity.
And they hijacked the Statue of Liberty, controlling it with a Nintendo joystick. I forgot what the turbo stick or something like that. And so they walked the Statue of Liberty through the streets of New York and made everybody party.
So fucking stupid. No, I actually like the movie. I'm just saying that part.
I saw it with, I think it was Mike Sills and I went to go see it, and we both had positive feelings toward it, I think.
I saw it with the whole family. My sister, my dad, my mom. It was like a family event.
Yeah, if you think about the irony, right? The movie, the arc of the plot is like this celebration of America as a melting pot, and he has Trump in the video. So
The thing was, I felt we walked out of it just being like that movie sucked. That's what basically. I mean, I didn't come out of it thinking it was, only because I felt like it was a corny retread of the first one. And Slimer, makes his appearance back in it. I think it was just one of those cases where they didn't have like a really that original an idea. I remember the painting, that was kind of cool. The guy, they made it look cool again in the trailer because that, what was his name, Ivan?
Vigo, the master of evil.
Yeah, the paint. That actor looked genuinely like sinister, and I was like, oh, this will be cool. And then he was just a painting that talked to the dorky looking motherfucker who wanted to bang Sigourney Weaver at the art gallery. And
that dude from Ally McBeal.
Yeah, you're
putting on a weird accent. Yeah,
it was weird. It was like, now you got this guy pining for Sigourney Weaver, and now she's with Bill Murray, the guy that she was vehemently against in the first one. But that was, it didn't. I don't know. There was a lot that didn't work in that movie.
There's a scene in the beginning of the movie where they're sort of introducing characters and like what they're doing now, and it's with Bill Murray, and he's like hosting a hack sort of psychic paranormal phenomena TV show. Right. I think that's probably for me like the best part of the movie, especially when Bill Murray just points to his brain. He's like, "Until next time," and then he just kind of laughs. It's like so Bill Murray, like, and I think that is like the only part of the movie that actually made me laugh, because the rest of the movie is really not all that funny.
I want to say this is a testament to just how forgettable the song is, though. We aren't reviewing the song; we're reviewing the movie. That it was.
This was '89, and I have to say, like in '89, I was already super up my own ass about my music taste. I sort of drew these dumb high school kid lines about what was cool to like and what wasn't. And I got to say, for this song to penetrate my barrier of shit that I would have said I hated, I think it speaks volumes to that. It's actually a pretty good song. It scratches like a little nostalgia itch that I have for that era. There's something about the part where it goes, where if I was in my car, I'd be like, this makes me kind of smile a little bit. And I think about his weird Gumby haircut.
It worked. It makes you think of it. It makes you talk about the movie, which was the whole point of the fucking songs. Let's all give the Ghostbusters 2 peace. All right, guys. Well, that's been our episode. Great job again. And we'll be back again another couple weeks. So for that, signing out, Jason, Nathan from Newark, Ramshackle Dan. Thanks for enjoying the show. Like and subscribe. All that bullshit. So right on, guys. We'll see you next time.
Bye.